It doesn't begin with a slap. It doesn't start with a scream. Disrespect, the kind that rewrites how people see you, begins quietly, a strange smirk when you speak a joke told just a little too loudly at your expense, a shift in the room's energy that no one admits, but everyone feels. And most people? They ignore it. They laugh it off. They tell themselves it's not worth reacting to. But that's where they lose not just the moment, but the entire frame. Because here's the truth: disrespect ignored is not dismissed, it's approved. And the second it happens, you're not just being tested by one person, you're being observed by many. They're not watching to see if you're strong. They're watching to see if you're safe to challenge. If you don't push back, you become the new baseline. And Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. Respect is not something you earn in theory, it's something you enforce in action. In this world, people don't rise based on goodness. They rise because they make it dangerous to cross them. So the moment someone disrespects you, not tomorrow, not after you talk it out, but right then in real time, your silence or your stance will echo louder than any word. It never starts with an obvious attack. It begins in whispers, subtle shifts in body language, a delayed response to your comment, an offhand remark laced with a little too much amusement, a joke at your expense, a smile that doesn't reach the eyes, and you notice it. Your body feels it before your mind can explain it. But then comes the rationalization: don't make a scene. It's probably nothing. And just like that, you failed the first test. Because disrespect, especially in public, is rarely about personal hate. It's about social positioning. The person doing it isn't just trying to be funny. They're sending out a signal: let's see how far I can go with you. And here's the part. Most people miss the entire room is watching your reaction, even if they pretend not to. They're watching to see what's allowed, what the social script around you will be from now on. If you let it pass, you become safe, not respected, not strong, just safe to ignore, to challenge, to slowly strip away. This is the first law of social power: what you allow once you teach others to repeat. And in American culture, especially in workspaces, social groups, and digital spaces, this rule multiplies. One off comment today becomes tomorrow's sarcasm. One fake compliment today becomes next week's public dismissal. People aren't cruel because they hate you. They test you because they don't believe you'll do anything. And if you don't, they'll keep going until you disappear entirely, either by choice or erosion. The tragedy. Most people confuse tolerance with maturity. They think not reacting is strength. But silence, when it lacks intention, is just permission in disguise. The truth is, you don't earn respect by letting things go. You earn it by letting people feel that they've gone too far without ever needing to raise your voice. That's the moment you're truly being tested, not for your kindness, not for your intelligence, but for your ability to draw a line without announcing it. And if you fail, you've just become the example no one wants to be. The one who flinched, smiled, nodded, and then slowly vanished from relevance. Machiavelli knew this centuries ago. Power isn't taken. It's surrendered one small compromise at a time. And every time you let a subtle insult pass unchallenged, you're not just losing ground. You're rewriting your social value. Not with your words, but with your silence. And in a world that's constantly watching, silence isn't neutral, it's a verdict. Most people react. That's their default programming. They hear something offensive, and they feel the need to defend, to explain, to prove that they didn't deserve it. But here's what Machiavelli would tell you: the person who reacts emotionally is the one who gives away their power. Because in any room at any moment, the one who shows the most need automatically holds the least influence. That's why your first real move after being disrespected should never be a response. It should be strategic silence. And let's be clear, silence doesn't mean you're ignoring it. You're not pretending it didn't happen. You're doing something far more potent. You're withdrawing energy. You're creating a vacuum where they expected friction. And that vacuum is terrifying, because now they don't know what you're thinking. When someone disrespects you, what they expect is control. They expect your reaction to follow their script, for you to laugh nervously, to get defensive, to try and smooth things over. Why? Because that gives them power. But when you interrupt that rhythm, when your eyes harden, your voice softens, and your energy freezes, you send a different message entirely. You don't get to steer this interaction anymore. This is not passive. This is precision detachment. You stop laughing. You stop feeding the moment. You stop performing emotional labor for people who don't deserve it. Because in doing so, you become unreadable, and unreadable people are dangerous, not because they lash out, but because they don't reveal their next move. Think about it when someone throws a disrespectful remark into a room, and you don't bite, don't play along, don't even blink. The discomfort doesn't hit you, it hits them. It's like throwing a punch into a void. They expected a fight. Instead, they feel embarrassed by their own swing. And that's where the shift begins. You're not giving them drama. You're giving them doubt. And doubt is 1,000 times more powerful than revenge. Because now they question their position. Now they wonder if they've crossed a line they can't walk back from. And most importantly, they no longer feel in control. You don't need to insult them. You don't need to retaliate. All you need to do is pause the conversation and make them live in the silence they created. That's where true influence begins, not in noise, but in the moment when someone realizes they don't know what you're thinking, what you'll do next, or how much of their access they've just lost. Machiavelli never struck first. He observed. He let his enemies expose themselves fully comfortably before acting. Because when you wait in silence and let them believe they've won your response when it finally comes doesn't land as anger. It lands as fate. Most people can handle a moment, a single confrontation, a single act of silence, a single power move. But what breaks them isn't the first test. It's what comes after. Because here's the brutal truth. Disrespect doesn't end with the first reaction. It lingers. It studies you. And it waits to see if your boundary was just a performance or a permanent shift. This is where most people fail. They confront disrespect in the moment, but then go back to normal the next day. They laugh again, answer messages, accept invitations, and pretend as if nothing happened. And that's exactly when the next test arrives, but quieter, more subtle, a backhanded compliment, an accidental exclusion, a joke about your silence the other day. It's not a coincidence. It's a follow-up probe. And when you treat that first boundary like a one-time performance instead of a full identity shift, you tell them push again. I might fold now. This is why Machiavelli didn't believe in forgiveness as a political tool, because if people sense the door is still cracked, they'll always try to push it open. So here's the move. Most never make you redraw the relationship immediately. You don't go back to old rhythms. You don't water down your tone. You don't offer them the same access they had before. You become colder, sharper, more defined. Not with cruelty, with clarity. This is not about punishment. It's about posture. Your tone becomes cleaner. Your responses shorter. Your availability thinner. You don't make a show out of it. You don't post about it. You don't over-explain. You simply let the shift be felt, not spoken. And that silence, that absence of warmth, it says more than any angry speech ever could. Because when you pull away, when you remove the emotional oxygen from the room, the person who disrespected you starts to panic. They begin to realize they've lost something more valuable than your approval, your presence. And in modern culture, where constant access is the norm, becoming unavailable is one of the most terrifying moves you can make. You're no longer playing defense. You're not reacting to disrespect. You're reframing the entire relationship. You're showing them and the entire social circle watching from the sidelines that what once was familiar is now off limits. Machiavelli taught that punishment done publicly and with precision does more than end a threat, it educates the room. When you shift your posture with no announcement, the people around you adjust. They speak differently. They observe more. They choose their words carefully. Because the message has landed, I am not someone you get to reset with. Not through apologies, not through charm, not through time. That access expired the moment they thought disrespect wouldn't cost them anything, and now they understand just how wrong they were. There's a reason your first reaction matters, but what you do after the dust settles is what they remember. Because people don't learn from confrontation alone. They learn from consequence, not the fair kind. The undeniable kind. Most people were taught that punishment should be equal to the offense. That being the bigger person means staying calm, staying fair, staying measured. But here's what Machiavelli understood. Fairness is forgettable. If the consequence fits the crime, it fades. But if it exceeds the crime, if it creates a moment that lingers, that rattles their sense of safety, they won't forget. Not ever. You're not punishing them out of spite. You're not angry. You're strategic. Because when someone crosses a boundary and you respond with silence so cold, distance so deliberate, and presence so absent that they start questioning their entire standing with you, that is a lesson. A reminder that you don't tolerate violations. You erase access. Think about this. If they disrespected you in public, the message must be returned in public, but not through insults, not through revenge, through social precision. If they make a joke, you don't laugh. You pause, look at them, and respond to someone else in the room, cutting them off without even addressing them. If they ask you a question, you give a one-word answer, then turn away. If they try to engage you again, you remain polite, but formal, cool, distant, unreachable. This isn't cruelty, this is correction. You're not trying to make them feel small, they already did that to themselves. You're just removing the illusion that access to you is automatic, and that in modern society, where everyone is performing for attention, validation, and inclusion, is one of the most powerful punishments imaginable. And here's the twist, it doesn't look like punishment. There's no fight, no shouting, no confrontation. But the message is crystal clear. You're no longer in the room where I exist. And that loss, the quiet closure, the vanishing warmth cuts deeper than any argument ever could. Most people fear being hated. But what truly breaks them is being ignored by someone they once had access to. And in that void, they don't just miss you, they reflect. They replay everything. They wonder, was it that comment I made? Did I go too far? Why did their tone change? And that confusion, that discomfort becomes a kind of prison they built for themselves, one you don't even have to visit. Because power isn't in overpowering someone. It's in leaving them alone and letting them feel the weight of what they lost, not in volume, but in absence. That's when the punishment becomes unforgettable. That's when you become unforgettable. Not everyone responds to shame. Not everyone is afraid of being disliked. In fact, some people feed on chaos. They provoke for sport. They test boundaries just to see the reaction. These aren't your average disrespectful acquaintances, they're the disruptors. The ones who don't want peace. They want to destabilize you. And that's where most people make the mistake of escalating emotionally. But Machiavelli never played that game. He didn't believe in shouting down opponents or trying to out-humiliate them. Instead, he exposed them. And in today's world where reputation is currency, exposure is a far more powerful tool than revenge. Here's how it works when someone disrespects you publicly again, and it becomes clear that it wasn't just a mistake. You don't match their aggression. You escalate socially. You take the spotlight they wanted and turn it on them not with rage, but with surgical precision. Let's say someone makes a passive-aggressive joke about you in a group. You don't return fire. Instead, you pause, hold eye contact, and say something like, "Interesting joke, do you use that one at work too?" Or, "Wow." If that's how you speak to your friends, I'd hate to hear how you treat strangers. You're not arguing. You're spotlighting. You're letting their words hang in the air long enough for everyone else to hear them for what they truly are. And that's the magic. You're not trying to humiliate. You're allowing them to self-destruct in public. You make them wear their own words. You give the room time to process what just happened. And more often than not, the room turns on them, not because you told them to, but because you removed the mask the person was hiding behind. This is how you dominate without ever raising your voice. You don't punish them with force. You frame them with precision. They don't even realize they've been cornered until the silence that follows their joke becomes unbearable. Because when you make someone look small in front of others, not by overpowering them, but by showing who they really are, you collapse the illusion they built for themselves. And that collapse is far more painful than any direct retaliation could be. Machiavelli understood that true power doesn't come from dramatic revenge. It comes from making your enemy look foolish without saying anything they can defend against. When the room begins to associate them with insecurity, weakness, or cruelty, and associates you with restraint, control, and presence, the dynamic flips. They stop being the disruptor. You become the mirror. And no one likes what they see in a mirror when it reflects the truth. That's not revenge. That's reputation warfare, and it's always won in silence. Once you've withdrawn your energy and reframed the relationship, the real game begins not with the person who disrespected you, but with everyone else watching silently from the sidelines. Because the truth is, people don't just remember what you said. They remember how you shifted the atmosphere. They remember how your tone changed, how your warmth vanished, how you moved differently afterward, less available, more defined. And here's the secret: most people can handle one confrontation. What they can't handle is your consistency. They're not afraid of a one-time silence. They're afraid of the fact that you never returned to who you were before the line was crossed. That's what makes you an anomaly. And anomalies by nature bend the room around them. In a culture that thrives on emotional openness over sharing, and always being on becoming difficult to read is disruptive. People don't know where they stand with you anymore, and that unsettles them. They think twice before joking with you. They rephrase their words before speaking. They hesitate before tagging you in. That's not fear. That's respect born of uncertainty. Because when someone can't predict you, they can't manipulate you. Most people are walking patterns. They telegraph everything: their triggers, their boundaries, their need to be liked. But when you choose restraint over reaction, when your energy shifts subtly but powerfully, your presence becomes a variable they have to calculate around. And now every room you enter feels it. You don't have to speak first. You don't have to interrupt. You don't even need to assert your boundaries anymore. Your very presence starts doing the work for you. This is what Machiavelli meant by presence. Not popularity, not charisma, a weight, a psychological gravity. When you walk in, the energy adjusts. Conversations soften. People lower their voices or straighten their posture, not out of fear, but instinct. Because you've become someone they don't want to misstep around. This presence isn't loud. It's built through subtraction, by taking away over-explaining, people-pleasing, fake laughter, constant availability. By subtracting what made you accessible to everyone, you become magnetic to a few, the right ones. And now you've shifted the rules. You don't chase respect. You don't demand loyalty. You don't need to threaten boundaries, because you've become a figure people move around, not through. You're no longer a participant in social games. You've become the terrain they're trying to navigate without a map. That's the power of being unreadable, unavailable, and unmistakably distinct. That's how kings moved in Machiavelli's world, and that's how you begin to move in yours. At some point, it happens. The one who disrespected you realizes they made a mistake. Maybe they sense the shift. Maybe they feel the void where your presence used to be. Maybe the silence they once laughed at has grown too loud to ignore, and now they try to crawl back in with a smile, a joke, a casual message, or even a half-hearted apology. They want to test the ice, to see if it's still frozen or if time has melted it back to warmth. But this is where most people break. This is where the boundary begins to bleed again. You've already endured the test. You've withdrawn your energy. You've reframed the relationship. You've built presence through distance. Now this is the moment of legacy, the moment that doesn't just define the dynamic, but defines you. And here's where Machiavelli's deepest insight comes in. Mercy can be more terrifying than punishment when it's delivered without warmth. You don't lash out. You don't accept the apology. You don't even act cold. You act unchanged. Because power isn't about revenge. It's about control. And when you no longer flinch, when you no longer adjust yourself to accommodate someone's remorse, you become untouchable. Let them talk. Let them joke. Let them test. But you stay still. No explanation. No closure. No return. Because the greatest punishment is not being shouted at, it's being ignored by someone who used to care. They feel it. Every time they look for your eyes and find nothing. Every time they speak and realize you're not listening the way you used to. That's when they understand the door didn't close with anger, it closed with finality. You've redefined their place in your world, not with confrontation, but with absence. And when your absence carries the same weight as your presence once did, that's when you've mastered the final frame. You've become someone who can't be disrespected, not because you're feared, but because you've become too expensive to access. Now others see it too. They see how you handled it. Not with emotion, not with drama, but with restraint. And from that day forward, you don't have to demand respect. You don't even have to speak, because people will start editing themselves in your presence. That's when you stop being a person and start becoming a standard, the one people refer to with caution, admiration, and a quiet kind of awe. You've moved past needing respect. You've become the measure by which all others are judged. And that is the final transformation Machiavelli would insist on. You don't respond to disrespect. You evolve into something it can no longer reach. In life, disrespect is rarely loud at first. It often begins in silence, a dismissive glance, a passive-aggressive joke, or a shift in tone that makes you question yourself. But the real danger isn't the insult itself, it's in how you respond. Most people ignore it, hoping it will stop. But what Machiavelli teaches us is clear: what you tolerate becomes your identity. The lesson is simple yet profound: if you don't set the tone, the world will set it for you. And that tone is enforced not by reacting with anger, but by responding with control. You don't need to scream, argue, or fight to earn respect. You earn it by becoming someone who doesn't flinch, someone who doesn't chase approval, someone whose silence speaks louder than retaliation ever could. When someone crosses the line, it's not about punishing them. It's about redefining access. Distance becomes discipline. Consistency becomes clarity. You don't become respected by being liked. You become respected by being unmistakably unavailable for disrespect. So take this with you. Next time someone tests your boundaries, don't explain, don't justify. Pause. Reframe. And let your absence become the reminder that some doors once closed never reopen. If this message resonates with you, if you've ever felt the need to reclaim your space, your presence, your value, then share this with someone who needs to hear it. Hit the subscribe button, give it a like, and help spread a mindset of calm power and unshakable self-worth. This isn't just about strategy. It's about building a life where you're no longer fighting for respect because you've made it your baseline. Own your silence, redefine your presence, and let the world adjust.